Good evening. Welcome to South Asia Newsline. I'm Yeshi Chanzam. Here are the top stories we are tracking for you on Wednesday, the 28th of April. India's top court stays demolition drive in violence-hit area of New Delhi. IMF warns inflation current account deficit to remain near-term risk for Pakistan. And Sri Lanka promises impartial probe after first death in weeks of protests. And now for all the details. India's Supreme Court on Wednesday ordered a stay on demolition shortly after civic authorities began tearing down illegal structures in New Delhi's Jahangirpuri area, which recently witnessed communal violence. The court ordered that the status quo should be maintained until the next hearing in the case on Thursday.
India's Supreme Court on Wednesday stayed demolition of small illegal retail shops shortly after civic authorities began tearing down the structures under protection of police and security forces in New Delhi's Jahangirpuri area. The drive to demolish the properties came 4 days after violence in the area during a Hindu religious procession. A three-judge bench of the top court headed by the Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramana ordered that the status quo should be maintained until the next hearing on Thursday. The petitioner to the court said MCD, Municipal Corporation of Delhi, governed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi's BJP, had not alerted the local shopkeepers before the razing operation.
नहीं अभी कुछ ऐसा नहीं अभी तो ग्राउंड पे यहाँ जरा असेसमेंट करने दो काम भी करने दो यार
रुक गया है अब एमसीडी की तरफ से आपको
यस
ओके
एमसीडी ने भी रोक दिया है और पुलिस की तरफ से
दीपेंद्र जी
So far, police have arrested at least 23 people in connection with the violence over the weekend. This month, several homes and shops were also torn down in central Madhya Pradesh and western Gujarat states in the aftermath of incidents of communal violence. Both states are ruled by the BJP.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday inaugurated the three-day Global Ayush Investment and Innovation Summit in Western Gandhinagar city, where he said that to promote the traditional medicine industry, India will soon launch Ayush Mark, which will give authenticity to quality Ayush products made in country. Mauritius Prime Minister and WHO Chief were also present on the occasion. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday inaugurated the three-day Global Ayush Investment and Innovation Summit at Gandhinagar in Western Gujarat state. His Mauritian counterpart Pravind Jugnauth and Dr Tredos Ghebreyesus, Director General World Health Organization, were present on the occasion. The summit will help uncover investment potential and give a fillip to innovation, research and development, startup ecosystems and the wellness industry. Speaking on the occasion, PM Modi said India will soon launch the Ayush Mark to recognize traditional medicine products, which will give the authenticity to quality Ayush products of the country. Ayush is the acronym for alternate systems of medicine: Ayurveda, Yoga and Naturopathy, Unani, Siddha and Homeopathy.
भारत एक स्पेशल आयुष मार्ग भी बनाने जा रहा है, जिसकी एक ग्लोबल पहचान बनेगी। भारत में बने उच्चतम गुणवत्ता के आयुष प्रोडक्ट्स पर ये मार्क लगाया जाएगा। ये आयुष मार्क आधुनिक टेक्नोलॉजी के प्रावधानों से युक्त होगा। इससे विश्व भर के लोगों को क्वालिटी आयुष प्रोडक्ट्स का भरोसा मिलेगा।
PM Modi also said that India will soon start the Ayush visa category for those who come to the country seeking traditional ways of treatment. WHO Chief Dr Tredos stressed on the development of traditional medicines, while Mauritius Prime Minister said it was a matter of pride for him to participate in the summit. Later, PM Modi and Mauritius counterpart held a bilateral meeting aimed at bolstering ties. Both leaders discussed the ongoing development partnership and cooperation in defence, capacity building, people-to-people exchanges and Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebration. They also reviewed progress of the Metro Express project and the proposals for an Ayush Centre of Excellence in Mauritius. Mauritius Prime Minister is on an 8-day visit to India. He will also pay a visit to northern Varanasi city apart from his official engagements in Gujarat and capital New Delhi. The International Monetary Fund has warned that near-term risk from rising inflation and a current account deficit has increased for Pakistan, and it has sharply revised its projections ahead of talks with Pakistani officials expected this week. Meanwhile, Pakistan's newly elected Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, in his first cabinet meeting on Wednesday, instructed ministers to prepare for war against poverty, inflation and unemployment, the challenges the previous government failed to counter.
IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has kept its growth forecast for Pakistan unchanged at 4% for fiscal year 2022, though it noted that near-term risks from rising inflation and a changing external environment had increased and sharply revised the global moneylenders' projections for the country's current account deficit and inflation. In the World Economic Outlook released on Tuesday, the IMF projected Pakistan's current account deficit to hit $18.5 billion this fiscal year. Pakistan requires gross external financing of over $35 billion on a current account deficit of 5.3% of GDP in 2022, it stated. Meanwhile, the World Bank in a biannual report pointed out Pakistan needed to take urgent measures to tighten the fiscal belt for ensuring debt sustainability. It cautioned that rising food and energy inflation was expected to diminish purchasing power of households. Pakistan's newly appointed Finance Minister Miftah Ismail, a former IMF economist, is expected to restart talks with the IMF this week to resume a stalled $6 billion bailout program, but negotiations will be tough with many targets off track. Energy subsidies announced by ousted Premier Imran Khan, which are burning through Pakistan's public finances, are also an immediate concern. A rollback would be politically difficult, with Khan reaching a pressure for fresh elections and consumer inflation already clocking in at 12.7% in March.
Moving on, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf PTI's regional president Sardar Tanveer Ilyas was earlier this week elected as new premier of Pakistan-administered Kashmir in an election boycotted by the opposition. PTI chief Imran Khan nominated Ilyas as the party's candidate after his handpicked premier Sardar Abdul Qayyum Niazi resigned on Thursday after 25 lawmakers of his party revolted and moved a resolution of no confidence motion against him. His ouster came days after Imran Khan lost his premiership in a no-confidence vote in Pakistan's National Assembly. The party workers had blamed Niazi of ignoring fundamental rights of the people in the illegally occupied region.
हमारे कारकुनान जो है इस हुकूमत से वज़ीर-ए-आज़म आज़ाद कश्मीर की परफॉर्मेंस से नाला थे, तहफ़्फ़ुज़ात थे, जो कि गाहे बगाहे वक्तन फ़वक्तन हुकूमत फेडरल हुकूमत के पास पेश किए जाते रहे। यहाँ भी इनका खदशात का इज़हार किया जाता रहा, तो नतीजतन उसमें कोई जो है खातिर ख्वाह उसमें पेशरफ़्त ना हो सकी।
In news from Sri Lanka, Sri Lankan police will launch an impartial and transparent investigation of clashes with protesters after the first death in weeks of unrest over the government's handling of the economy, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has said. Police fired live ammunition to scatter protesters on Tuesday in the town of Rambukkana, northeast of the capital Colombo, killing one person and wounding a dozen.
Sri Lanka's Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa on Wednesday said he expects the police to investigate clashes between police officers and anti-government protesters that led to the first death in weeks of civil unrest. Deeply distressed following the tragedy in Rambukkana, I have every confidence that a strict impartial investigation will be carried out, Rajapaksa said in a tweet. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the younger brother of the Prime Minister, in a Twitter post urged all citizens to refrain from violence as they protest. He said that police will carry out an impartial and transparent inquiry into the incident. Police fired live ammunition to scatter protesters on Tuesday in Rambukkana, a town around 3 hours northeast of the commercial capital Colombo, killing one person and injuring a dozen more. Demonstrations have raged across the South Asian island of 22 million people for weeks, with people voicing anger against what they perceive as government mishandling of the economy that has led to shortages of essentials and prolonged power cuts. Sri Lankan police has imposed a curfew in southwestern region of Rambukkana until further notice following the incident. Tuesday's death was the first fatality since largely peaceful protests began last month. It comes as Sri Lankan officials meet with IMF, the International Monetary Fund, on a potential emergency loan program aimed at staving off a shortage of fuel and other essentials. The IMF on Wednesday said discussions are at an early stage and that any deal would require adequate assurances that Sri Lanka can resolve the unsustainability of its debt situation.
The United States, the United Nations and other international organizations have condemned Tuesday's deadly blast that targeted educational institutions in Afghan capital Kabul, killing at least 6 persons. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks so far. In the Daste neighborhood of Afghan capital Kabul, 2 blasts hit Abdul Rahim Shahid High School, killing at least 6 and injuring several others on Tuesday. Some reports suggest that casualties were much higher. Another blast took place on the same day near the Mumtaz Tuition Center. No one has claimed responsibility for the incident as of yet. The United States, Afghan politicians, humanitarian organizations and Kabul-based diplomatic missions have all condemned the incident. The United States State Department spokesperson Ned Price in a statement expressed condolences to the Afghan families and stated that the perpetrators must be brought to justice. The United Nations mission in Afghanistan, UNAMA, also condemned the heinous attack on schools and said those responsible for the crime targeting schools and children must be brought to justice. The UNICEF Executive Director Catherine Russell in a statement said she was horrified by the brutal attacks targeting school children in Kabul. She said attacks on children and education facilities constitute grave rights violations. Meanwhile, the Taliban government said that Islamic Emirate is committed to punishing the perpetrators and preventing the repeat of such attacks in the future. Since assuming power in August last year, Afghanistan's Taliban rulers claim to have secured the country. But international authorities and analysts warn there is still a risk of militancy resurging, and the Islamic State militant group has claimed responsibility for multiple attacks in the past. With the sweltering heat continuing in several Indian states and the temperatures crossing over 35 degrees Celsius, zoo authorities are taking special measures in providing relief to these helpless animals and keeping the inmates cool.
Sizzling heat in India's northern Agra city has prompted zoo authorities to take special measures to keep the inmates cool. Zoo animals are receiving special treat of juicy fruits to help them fight the harsh summer sun. Other special arrangements like water coolers, ponds and sheds have been made by the authorities to bring down the temperatures for animals. The mercury levels in the city have been hovering over 40 degrees Celsius mark. Water sprinklers are used at regular intervals around enclosures to make the environment soothing for the animals.
इधर वाटर स्प्रिंकलर हमेशा दिन में 3 बार सुबह दोपहर पे इवनिंग का टाइम चालू करवाता है। तालाब में तो ताज़ा वाटर हमेशा फिल भरा हुआ मिलेंगे, इसलिए आज बालू अपना अपना अंदर जाके बैठ के पानी से कूद करके उसका गर्मी कट कर सकता है। और काना में जो फ्रूट जूसी फ्रूट्स होता है, जो वाटरमेलन, मस्कमेलन, ग्रेप्स, पोमेग्रेनेट है, वो सब वो देने की वजह से उसका थोड़ा उसमें से अच्छा खासा जूसी मिल जाता है उसे, और रिफ्रेशमेंट भी होता है।
At Nandan Zoological Park in eastern Bhubaneswar city, zoo authorities have also made special arrangements to help the animals fight the harsh summer sun. Amid the heat wave, elephants are allowed to wallow in the pond twice a day to get relief from scorching heat. They have installed water shower thatched sheds to keep the animals cool during summer. The authorities have also made arrangements for birds and reptiles to beat the penetration of direct sunlight. Summers in India are a difficult time when soaring temperatures lead to numerous casualties for humans as well as animals. Possible reasons for the rising temperatures range from global warming to greater urbanization, leading to taller buildings and diminishing green cover.
Well, that's all we have for you from South Asia this evening. Now our viewers can watch the show on SouthAsiaNewsline.com, You can also visit us on facebook.com/Asia Newsline and follow us on Twitter @Asia Newsline. That's all in tonight's edition. We will see you same time tomorrow. Good night.